Here's a look at the world's 9 most dangerous personality types. Ever wondered what histrionic, antisocial, and schizotypal personalities are really like? Some folks might seem really odd and eccentric, believing in strange things and keeping to themselves. That's where schizotypal personality comes in. It's pretty eye-opening when you start recognizing these patterns in people around you. People with histrionic personality are highly self-centered and overly emotional. They use dramatic language and behavior to grab attention, aiming to gain sympathy and notice from others. These individuals are natural performers who don't mind putting on a show, even if it's not particularly skillful. They love being the center of attention, display shallow emotions, and are extremely sensitive to criticism, often struggling to handle any negative feedback. In social situations, people with histrionic personality traits often become the center of attention by telling entertaining stories or engaging in outlandish behavior. They are highly responsive to praise and appreciation, working hard to maintain this spotlight. They constantly need external validation to confirm their self-worth, much like how actors depend on audience applause to validate their performance. For instance, someone with a histrionic personality might suddenly break into a wild dance at a party or tell an ordinary story with excessive dramatic flair to draw everyone's attention. On social media, they might frequently post attention-grabbing photos or videos, eagerly anticipating likes and comments. Histrionic personality disorder is one of the most common personality disorders. It affects about 2% of the general population, with women being twice as likely to be diagnosed as men. Once this personality pattern is established, it's challenging to completely change through current treatment methods. However, long-term psychotherapy can help improve strained relationships and social interaction. Obsessive-compulsive personality disorder is essentially a personality type where individuals maintain extremely high, sometimes even harsh standards for themselves and their surroundings. These people are constantly chasing perfection, wanting everything to align perfectly with their standards without any room for error. They have this strong need to keep everything meticulously organized and pay incredible attention to details and rules. People with this disorder tend to be overly cautious and particular, setting impossibly high standards for perfection, while deep down they're struggling with profound insecurity. They hold themselves to these unrealistic standards of absolute perfection, yet they're never quite satisfied with their work or life, which leads to constant tension, anxiety, and distress. They often exercise excessive self-control, focus too much on themselves, and carry an overwhelming sense of responsibility. In their daily lives, they walk on eggshells, terrified of making mistakes, and find it nearly impossible to relax mentally. Their persistent feelings of insecurity drive them to constantly worry about overlooking something or making errors. They frequently feel compelled to check if their actions are correct, don't trust their own memory, and often get caught in endless cycles of overthinking. They'll repeatedly review and double-check their plans, always fearful of missing something or making a mistake. The characteristics of the obsessive-compulsive personality can be summarized as follows. Perfectionist, characterized by an excessive demand for strict and perfect order and orderliness, and a lack of flexibility and openness. Stubbornness, stubbornly doing things according to their own views and rules. Lack of concern for human relations. Difficult to express passionate emotions. Full of doubts. Difficulty in making decisions for fear of making mistakes, preference for debate, strict adherence to ethics, highly responsible and meticulous. Obsessive-compulsive personality disorder shares many characteristics with OCD and has a high comorbidity rate with it. Both conditions are also closely linked to depression. While they may appear similar, there are fundamental differences between them. OCD falls within the category of neurosis, involving obsessive thoughts and compulsive behaviors. Patients recognize their repetitive thoughts and actions as inconsistent with their desires, causing anxiety and distress that interfere with their daily life and important functions. On the other hand, obsessive-compulsive personality disorder is a personality disorder characterized by excessive demands for order, strictness, and perfection, with a notable lack of flexibility, openness, and efficiency. Epidemiological studies have shown prevalence rates ranging from 1% to 20% in clinical samples. Men have a higher prevalence rate at 3% compared to women at 0.6%. Interestingly, there's no correlation between age, and prevalence rates. People with obsessive-compulsive personality disorder typically have higher levels of education, employment rates, and marriage rates compared to those with other personality disorders. Schizotypal personality disorder is a specific type of personality disorder that affects how people perceive the world, express emotions, communicate, think and understand themselves. These individuals often show a unique combination of being overly suspicious while also having grandiose thoughts, yet they can easily feel ashamed and embarrassed. It's quite contradictory, really. One of the main features is their persistent detachment from social relationships. They typically show little interest in connecting with others, have limited emotional expression in relationships, and struggle to form healthy attachments. Many create rich fantasy worlds in their minds as an escape. When it comes to perception, these individuals might experience hallucinations, like hearing voices when there's no actual sound or seeing things that aren't really there. Imagine sitting in a quiet room and suddenly hearing someone whisper in your ear, but you're completely alone. Their emotional responses can be quite unusual. They might appear emotionally flat or respond inappropriately to situations. For example, they could remain completely expressionless at a joyful celebration or suddenly burst into laughter at a funeral. Communication is often challenging for them. Their speech might be disorganized and hard to follow. If you ask them, "How was your day?" you might get a completely unrelated response that leaves you confused and wondering what they're trying to say. Their thought patterns can be quite peculiar and unrealistic. They might believe in theories without any scientific basis or think they have special powers, like being able to move objects with their mind. In terms of self-awareness, they often struggle with their identity. Sometimes they might feel disconnected from themselves, like looking in a mirror and not recognizing their own reflection, or feeling like they're multiple different people at once. One of the most striking features of antisocial personality disorder is extreme narcissism and self-centeredness, paired with a complete lack of empathy and remorse. These individuals struggle to form meaningful relationships with others. They consistently show a disregard for others' rights and social norms in both their behavior and emotional responses. Due to their inability to empathize, they can't understand others' suffering or feel compassion. This makes them willing to use any means necessary to achieve their goals, often resorting to lying and showing extreme indifference to others. In the world of someone with antisocial personality disorder, there's no room for anyone else, only themselves. There's no right or wrong, only what they want or don't want. While the exact cause of antisocial personality disorder isn't fully understood yet, experts point to several key factors. Genetic predisposition plays a significant role. Research shows that the closer the blood relationship to someone diagnosed with the disorder, the higher the risk of developing it. Environmental factors are equally important. According to Harvard University research, while 50% of antisocial personality disorder cases are influenced by genetics, the other half likely stems from various unknown environmental factors. People with dependent personality traits often appear timid and miserable in their daily lives. They tend to be fearful, indecisive, and gloomy, struggling to accomplish anything independently and habitually relying on others for help. When faced with rejection, these individuals experience extreme panic, constantly fearing abandonment. As a result, they typically endure mistreatment silently, a classic characteristic of dependent personality. These individuals frequently seek advice from friends, family, or colleagues, even for minor decisions like choosing what to wear or what to eat. In the workplace, they often find it challenging to complete tasks independently, constantly seeking explicit instructions and continuous supervision from colleagues or supervisors. People with dependent personality disorder often tolerate unsatisfying relationships out of fear of losing support and affection. They might remain silent even when facing abuse or disrespect. They struggle with being alone and constantly crave companionship from partners or friends to ease their inner anxiety and loneliness. The development of this psychological disorder may stem from various factors, including genetic predisposition, childhood parenting styles, and early traumatic experiences such as neglect or abuse. Here's how people with borderline personality disorder experience life. Their emotions are like a roller coaster. They're highly impulsive, emotionally unstable, and their relationships are incredibly intense, yet unstable. They struggle with their self-identity, constantly changing their views about themselves, their dreams, future plans, and even their moral values. Their emotions can flip like a switch, going from one extreme to another in moments. This condition can be really tough, not just for them but for everyone around them. Imagine someone who gets deeply affected by the smallest things. Their mood can change as quickly as the weather. Their relationships are just as unpredictable. One day they're incredibly close to someone. The next day they're distant. It's like they can't find steady ground. This condition might stem from tough childhood experiences or brain function issues. People diagnosed with BPD often live in a strange paradox, feeling calm inside while their external world seems chaotic. These individuals often feel empty and angry, believing they were denied proper love during childhood. This drives them to constantly seek affection. When they feel cared for, they might act like abandoned children, seeking help for depression, substance abuse, eating disorders, or past trauma. But if they fear losing that care, their mood can dramatically shift to inappropriate and intense anger. In the United States, about 1 to 2% of adults have BPD. The statistics show it affects 1 in every 33 women and 1 in every 100 men, typically starting in early adulthood. But there's hope. Recent research shows that many people with BPD can improve over time and eventually lead happy, peaceful lives. People with paranoid personality disorder display pathological and stubborn beliefs, often taking things to extremes. They're characterized by suspicion and paranoia, showing deep distrust of others' motives and being excessively vigilant. These individuals see the world as hostile and always expect the worst. They tend to connect unrelated events and circumstances to themselves, believing everything is somehow targeted at them. Even when others repeatedly explain that their suspicions are unfounded, they won't change their minds. They might even react aggressively towards those they suspect, which often leads others to keep their distance. When paranoid individuals show kindness, they're genuinely wholehearted about it. However, they lack middle ground. It's either good or bad, love or hate. They struggle to view situations objectively and comprehensively, always swinging to extremes. Due to this lack of objectivity, they believe they're always right and blame negative outcomes on others or circumstances. They're afraid to take responsibility and won't acknowledge how their own actions might have contributed to the situation. These people typically have an inflated self-image and can't handle criticism. They're hypersensitive to setbacks and failure. When questioned, they'll argue persistently, usually with flawed logic, refusing to give ground or admit mistakes. They're easily provoked, impulsive, confrontational, and prone to extreme behavior. Research shows that paranoid personality disorder affects 5.8% of all people with psychological disorders, with a prevalence rate of 0.4% to 1.6% in the general population. It's more common in males. Since these individuals rarely have self-awareness and deny their paranoid behaviors, the actual percentage might be higher than reported. Rebellious personality isn't just something we see in teenagers. Adults can have it too, just to different degrees. If rebelliousness was only a teenage phase, it would naturally fade away as people grow older. People with rebellious personalities tend to dismiss others' suggestions and requirements, preferring to handle relationships and tasks their own way. They have this really strong sense of defiance, and once they've made up their mind about something, they'll defend their position no matter what obstacles they face. These folks usually can't take advice from others, even when it's clearly right or beneficial for them. They almost always want to do the opposite of what's suggested and can be pretty stubborn about it. They're not great at managing relationships and often approach others with hostility and resistance. Their radical thinking and impulsive nature can lead them to make some pretty serious mistakes. What's more, rebellious personalities often don't fit in with mainstream society. They typically show two distinct traits: either they choose unconventional paths in life, or they might venture into illegal activities. While they'll work hard for their goals, their actions can make them a target for criticism. Because of their extreme nature, their life outcomes tend to go one of two ways, either extremely well or extremely poorly. This personality type, often referred to as avoidant personality, is mainly characterized by social avoidance and hypersensitivity to negative feedback. People with this personality tend to overestimate potential threats in everyday situations, leading them to avoid certain activities. They often appear melancholic and take on the role of silent observers from the sidelines. While they deeply desire to be part of a group, their fear of possible rejection or disapproval from others drives them to choose social isolation as a survival strategy. These individuals strongly prefer to be alone and solve problems independently. For them, asking others for help actually consumes more emotional energy than tackling issues by themselves. They avoid arguments with friends and might verbally agree with others even when they disagree internally. If an argument becomes unavoidable, they'll immediately stop the discussion once they notice logical flaws in the other person's argument or when emotions start running high. When faced with criticism, they tend to escape, disappear, ignore, or even block and unfriend people. In public situations requiring self-expression, they'll do everything possible to avoid it, and if they can't, they'll try their best to hide their nervousness without revealing their anxiety to anyone. People often exhibit a combination of multiple personality disorders rather than just a single one. It's very common to see different personality disorder traits mixed together in one individual. If you look at antagonists in novels, movies, or TV shows, they frequently display multiple personality disorders, perhaps a mix of paranoid, antisocial, and obsessive-compulsive traits. As mentioned in the book The Road Less Traveled, most people in our society have some degree of psychological issues, whether minor or significant. This is actually quite normal and more common than you might think.